And now we have on the programme through Zoom Luise Hennessy, who's a nurse with the Irish Motor Neurone Disease Association. So thank you very much, Luise, for coming on.
Good morning, Patrick. Thanks so much for having me on.
Great to have you, yeah. I suppose most people have heard of motor neuron disease, but it's a terribly serious condition, isn't it? Maybe you could tell us a little bit of what is known about it.
Yeah, so motor neuron disease, it's a progressive neurodegenerative disease that it basically affects the motor neurons or the nerves that are in the brain and the spine. And what happens is over time, the signal from those nerves doesn't reach the muscles, so people get very weak and the muscles waste. Then it can normally start for people kind of in their 60s and 70s, but we see people as young as in their 20s get it up until in their 90s as well. But it really is a disease really of the older age. We find that more men are affected by it by women. So it can affect how people walk, how they talk, how they eat and they drink, and how they breathe. And unfortunately, it is a terminal illness as well. So what can start as somebody having a few trips or being a bit clumsy with their hands can turn into this terminal disease then, where people develop a huge amount of disability over a certain period of time. The life expectancy normally for people with motor neuron disease is about 3 to 5 years, so it's known as a 1,000-day disease. So it's really important that we get out to people as soon as possible when they get the diagnosis then.
Right. Can it be misdiagnosed, or can people mistake the symptoms for something else at the beginning?
Well, I suppose it's the how the diagnosis, it's really a process of elimination. So say people present to their GP that they're having some falls or start dropping some things, or they've noticed some changes in their speech. What would normally happen is a GP will send them, maybe if it's in their limbs, we'll send them maybe to a neurosurgeon to see if there's anything going on with the brain or the spine. And then generally those scans come back clear and they're back to the GP, and then eventually the GP might refer them on to a neurologist, and they get the diagnosis. But they have to go through a whole reel of tests and investigations really to outrule everything else, say like Parkinson's or MS or a brain tumor or something like that. And it kind of comes down to the last thing then is really motor neuron disease. And then that is diagnosed by a neurologist. So on average, it takes about 18 months to get the diagnosis from when their symptoms first start. So it's a long journey for people to go through all those tests and investigations without really knowing what is the cause of it. And then they end up getting this devastating news then. So there's lots of reasons why people would go to their GP for having trips or falls or being clumsy in their hands, and it's very unlikely it will be motor neuron disease because it is such a rare condition. But they have to go through that process of outrooting everything else before they get to the stage of getting.
Right, and there's a whole range of symptoms, isn't there? And not everyone gets the same symptoms. So that must
That's it. There's no two people the same with this condition. So as I said, some people can start with a wee bit of slurred speech. Some people it could start maybe with their breathing, or some people it could start in their hands or in their arms, or some people it can start in the feet and the legs. So that makes it quite difficult for it to be picked up until you really put all the symptoms together, and that it's getting worse over time and it's not getting better with any intervention or physio rehab or anything like that.
Right, and there's no cause known at the moment as such.
No, we don't. We know it's a mixture between the environment and genetics, and it's really over time how that affects the person then to develop the disease. But we don't know the exact cause because it is so different for every single person that gets it, that it's really difficult then to understand why you get it and I don't get it. And we could have the same symptoms at the beginning or the same lifestyles and same family history, which is probably very unusual, but it can be very different. So you could have one family member get it and another not get it. There is, in about Ireland, about 15% of people we do see within families. So there's a higher risk for those people who have certain genes that we are aware of to developing the disease. But there's a lot of hope now around those gene types. There's a lot of research and drug trials, gene therapy trials happening at the moment around the world, and they've been very positive so far. So we're understanding more about the disease now in the last few years than we have beforehand, and that's thanks to all the research that happens throughout the world, and especially here in Ireland when Trinity College and with Beaumont Hospital under Prof. Orla Hardiman, who is the clinical lead for motor neuron disease in Ireland. So she's really taken a really dynamic group of team to kind of understand this more in depth, and she'll be one of the world leaders in understanding this disease and hopefully finding a cure at some stage as well too for it.
Right, and there are 4 different kinds, and they have very complicated names, haven't they?
They do. So motor neuron disease is very much an umbrella term
Right.
for lots of different types of diseases. So we just call it really MND here in Ireland and Europe and in other countries as well. But I suppose the most common type is called ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And most people that we see with motor neuron disease will have this type. And that basically affects the nerves in the brain and in the spine. So people with that type can normally present with some sort of limb weakness, or it can be in their speech or the swallow, their breathing as well. That generally has a life expectancy of about 3 to 5 years. But there are people that will live longer with it as well. These are all statistics at the end of the day, and there's no one person that fits in every statistic. The other type then is PLS, or primary lateral sclerosis, and that affects the upper nerves, so the nerves that are in the brain. And people can develop quite a lot of disability over time with this, but it generally doesn't affect life expectancy. But unfortunately, some people with PLS tend to go on to develop ALS, just to make things more complicated. The next type then will be bulbar type MND, and that's really where it affects the speech and the swallow. So I think everybody knows Charlie Bird at this stage and affected him. So that would be the initial presentation that we see where it starts to affect people's slurring and their speech, or they're having difficulties with the swallow as well. And then the other type kind of that we see, it's still very rare, is Kennedy's disease, and that really affects men. The women carry the genes, but it's men that get it. That doesn't affect life expectancy, but it does come with a certain amount of disability as well. So yeah, but we look after everybody with motor neuron disease. It doesn't matter what type they have, and we tailor our approach to the person, not to the disease.
Right, and are all the symptoms of a physical nature? It doesn't have an effect on the cognitive functions, does it?
Unfortunately, it's only really in the last number of years that we've realised that it can affect cognition. So about 50% of people can have some cognitive changes or some behavioural changes, where it can be very difficult for them to process information, understand information, and kind of plan and coordinate things.
Right.
So people can change their behaviour as well, or amplify some personality traits that are already there. And it's unfortunate because we used to think that was an area that was spared for people, but now with more research that's happening, understanding, and working with our psychology team as well and psychologist specialists, that we understand that there are people that can be affected, and it can be very mild for some people, but for some people it can be quite extreme. Right. And about 50% of people will have a frontal temporal dementia then, which is quite devastating too, because the person really changes in front of their loved one's eyes. Plus, they have then the physical aspect of it as well, where they can become quite disabled with it too. Then, right. So it's a huge complication, and it's a huge stress for family when there are some cognitive and behavioural changes with the motor neuron disease as well.
Right. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the organisation itself, the IMDA. How long has it been in existence?
So it was first set up by an amazing lady called Etna Frost in 1985. Her husband Noel had motor neuron disease, and she recognised that there was very little support out there for families and for people living with motor neuron disease. So she set up an organisation with other family members, and she was the IMNDA then was also one of the founding members of the International Alliance. So working with other motor neuron disease associations across the world. We're a very small country and a very small population. So it's always good to kind of look outside of Ireland and see what they're doing outside of Ireland and learning from their expertise and their experiences as well. So yeah, we've been around a while. We're Ireland's only organisation that supports people with motor neuron disease. We work very closely with the HSE and our team and our colleagues in the hospitals, in primary care centres and disability services as well, along with palliative care teams too across the country. So what kind of we do is, so we've over 450 people currently with motor neuron disease in Ireland, and we support nearly every one of them. So somebody gets a diagnosis, they come and they register with us. And then firstly, one of our 6 nurses will make contact and go out to see them at home. And from there, then we can offer support, we can offer advice and make sure that they're linked in with all the services and supports that they need to be linked in with, say, with community occupational therapy or physiotherapy or speech therapy, and make sure then they're referred then to the motor neuron disease clinic and the National Motor Neuron Disease Clinic up at Beaumont Hospital as well. And we work very closely with our colleagues in the Motor Neuron Disease Clinic too. Other things that we do is that we provide equipment. So we have a huge supply of equipment, from profile beds, special mattresses, specialised wheelchairs, motorised wheelchairs, communication devices, hoists, and all sorts of other things as well. And I suppose our goal is that by enabling us to provide that equipment to people, that they're not on a waiting list for a HSE piece of equipment, because people with motor neuron disease don't have time to wait on a waiting list for this stuff. So we like to get the equipment out as soon as possible, so they can have an independent as much as possible and the best quality of life as possible. We also provide other grants as well to help towards home care, and we also provide counselling support as well too. And thanks to Charlie Bird and the amazing fundraising that he did, we were able to hire 6 nurses that covers the Midlands, and we also provide help towards getting to hospital appointments too. And like many of people have heard, Charlie Bird, he uses a device to communicate, but it's his own voice that speaks. So we have funding now to help people whose voice may be affected. They record their voice, so if they needed to use a phone or a tablet to type to communicate, that it's their voice that's speaking. It's not a automated Google or Siri or anything like that. It's their own voice, because our voice is a huge part of who we are and our personality as well. And that's really important that we can provide that to families as well too.
Right. So with just 6 nurses, the workload must be fairly heavy to get around to everybody.
It's busy at the moment.
I'd imagine so, yeah.
I cover all of Dublin and all of Louth, and I have over 120 clients that I look after. And the rest of the nurses are based in the Midlands, South East, South West, and in the West as well. So we've a good kind of cover geographically all over Ireland. But just kind of due to our increasing population, people living longer, living better, we are seeing a higher number of clients now as well. So there's more demand on our nursing service, but also on our equipment service as well, and on our grants, to be able to continue to provide that to the best standards. So it has to be fair and equal across the country. So it is kind of getting a bit more difficult because we are a charity. Our funds come from about 85% from fundraising. We get about 10 to 15% from the government. So it's primarily through people doing community fundraisers where we get the support from. And it costs nearly over 2 million every year to be able to provide the services. And it's only going to get higher with our increase of clients, and also the expensive equipment that we also provide, and the increased cost of all that too.
Yeah, because the families looking after people with the condition, it must be a great strain on them as well, and they probably need support, don't they?
They do. It's not just the person that is diagnosed with motor neuron disease, it's the whole family that gets the diagnosis. And especially for those, the carers, so husbands and wives or their children, who have to support people. Like, we can't take away what the disease has done, but what we can do is improve their quality of life and make life well for them as much as is possible. And by having quick access to equipment the right equipment to keep that level of independence there, to have the right carers coming in to be able to support them, to let the families take a bit of kind of a burden off them so the carers can come in and help support the clients, whether that be with personal care or just a bit of companionship. I've one gentleman and he's a teacher and he loves going to the library. So the carer will bring him down to the library once a week, which is a huge benefit for him as well as for his family too. And then just with the psychological support as well, that they're able to access a counselling service in their local area as well to get that support. Because as the disease progresses, the person with motor neuron disease becomes more reliant on their family or their carers to be able to support them. And that can be very difficult if you're in a young household, maybe with kids, or there's people working. They may have to give up work to look after their loved one. They still have to look after their family as well. So there can be huge financial burden on them as well as a psychological burden on them too.
There's ongoing research, is there, into a possible cure sometime in the future? Has any progress been made in that area?
Well, there's a lot of exciting news, especially in the last few years. We know, I think, from COVID and how quickly the COVID vaccines were developed, that if you have a good amount of money and a large amount of money and enough researchers and people interested in this area, that it will be possible to be able to find a cure for this. And so in the last few years, there's been a lot more investment into this area. There's been a lot of backing from the drug companies to really look into this. So there's lots of trials happening now at the moment. So as I said, Ireland, we're such a small country that it's very hard to do research on such a small population of people that have this. So Orla Hardiman in Beaumont Hospital is part of a group called TRICALS. So that's and she works at a kind of consortium across Europe that has developed. So she works closely with her colleagues in all MND centres across Europe, and they do trials on a huge amount of people instead of just a small amount of people that they're able to manage here in Ireland. Because the more people that we can test drugs on and trial drugs with, the quicker we were able to get answers if this drug works, it doesn't work. Right. So they've kind of changed the kind of how they do things over the years. So they're looking at a lot of drugs that are used for other conditions. And so we know they're safe for people to take, which is the biggest and most expensive part of developing any new drug. We know they're safe for people to take, but we need to see now, do these drugs that are used for other conditions, will they work for this? And will they either slow down the progression, stop the progression, or maybe cure the disease as well? So there's a lot of exciting new drugs kind of coming around for trials and stuff like that now, which is really positive. And because we have Prof. Orla Hardiman here in Ireland, she's a real driving force. So if there is something out there that will help, we will hopefully be able to get our hands on it here in Ireland.
Right, yeah. And are there people who get involved in the association as volunteers to help?
There are. We're always looking for volunteers, so more than ever, and especially kind of, or even around fundraising, or even just going out and make awareness for the condition as well. So we have events throughout the year. We have our International MND Day, which is the 21st of June. We have a yearly conference as well, and we're always looking for support and volunteers to help around those big events. For our clients and their families to attend.
And you have a healthcare professional hub to put people in contact with the specialised care they might need, yeah.
That's it, because it's a very rare condition, and it's a very complicated condition as well. It's not just one area of somebody's life that will be affected, it's all their areas. So we work very closely with our specialist physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and speech therapists and psychology teams in order to provide the same level of care throughout the country. So it doesn't matter if you're down in Carhersaveen or if you're in Dublin, they have the same access to that specialist care as well. Because primarily people will be supported at home. We want to bring the services to people's homes, not having them to come up to Dublin or to Cork or to Galway where their other clinics are on. We want to be able to make sure that people are well at home, and that's the most important thing. So supporting our colleagues in the primary care teams and disability services is really important. And we're very blessed in Ireland that we have an amazing people that work within the HSE that are able to provide that. And we know people, if I went out to see somebody with motor neuron disease and I was worried and they felt like they needed a bit of physio or they needed an occupational therapist maybe to come and look and assess them for maybe a wheelchair or get the house changed a wee bit, I know when I ring my colleagues, they're out nearly straight away to be able to support our clients.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Luise?
Well, I suppose we are a charity, so we're always doing fundraising campaigns. So for this one, for March, we have a campaign called Drink Tea for MND. And look, Irish people love to drink tea, so it's a great campaign to get involved with, and it's an easy one to get involved with as well. So basically, you're asking people to go onto our website, which is imnda.ie or Irish Motor Neuron Disease Association.ie, and they can register for a tea event. So that can be a tea event where they have cups of tea and lovely cakes in their work or in their schools as well. They can also donate online if they're not able to participate or host a tea event. And they can also text in to donate as well. So if they text MND 4, the number 4, to 50300, that donates €4 and we get about €3.60 from that. From that text. So as I said, we primarily rely on fundraising to keep our services there, to be able to support our clients and our families. So it's really important. And I suppose in Ireland, we're very good at fundraising. We're very good at helping when we can help, and every little helps. So in terms of kind of what would €4 mean? So I suppose we for an iPad for somebody to communicate on, and to be able to record their voice and download their voice. That costs in total about €650. So it doesn't seem like a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of things, but that's giving somebody their voice back, which is really important. So sometimes I like to kind of equate, what does the money actually mean for that person? For counselling, then we provide counselling. So 6 sessions cost about €500 for that person, and we also provide it for their family members too. So every cent that we get goes directly back into patient services.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Luise, for coming on the programme, telling us about the condition. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you.